Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Jim Frazier of ARC Advisory Group, and this is the Smart City podcast. Today, we have a panel discussion with some intriguing end users of smart city technology. We have Kevin Comstock, Smart Cities Director of the City of Chattanooga, as well as Dr. Melissa Wiley, who's a data analyst with the City of Gainesville, Florida. Welcome to both of you. Hello.
Thank you, Jim.
Hey, well, thanks for joining us today. There's been a lot published and discussed about smart cities. Much of it's vaporware. Can each of you share some interesting projects that actually are happening on the ground in both Chattanooga and Gainesville?
Sure, be happy to. One of the we've got three major projects or three major activities that we've got going on here in Chattanooga. The first one is a collaborative of different governmental agencies, academia, hospitals, healthcare people, the electric power board here, the individuals that installed our fiber network about 10 years ago that created the gig city. So that group is kind of working together to identify opportunities in smart cities, more from an economic development perspective and to help bring technology and research to our university here. So, which leads into the next project, which is our Testbed. The city and the University of Tennessee Chattanooga have built a living laboratory on one of our corridors here in town. It's about 1.5 miles long, has 11 intersections on it, where we have deployed numerous sensors for vehicle detection, air quality detection, acoustic detection, to get a very good sense of how that corridor operates from an urban perspective. Some of the things that we're doing there are actually starting to test out some of the DSRC technologies for spat, challenge the signal phasing and timing, transmission between vehicles and infrastructure, and from the infrastructure back to the vehicles. So that's been going on here for about 18 months now. The next project that we've got is a collaborative project with the Oak Ridge National Labs and the National Renewable Energy Lab on a digital twin here in the community, which is a computer simulation of our entire city, basically. And the primary points that they're looking at with that is the traffic system, how we can reduce emissions, improve fuel economy, reduce energy use. This is a U.S. Department of Energy project. So, but it's in its second year now. They're getting ready to roll out the next 2 years of the project, and they're expanding that to be much more of a regional perspective than the one specific corridor that they've identified and have been working on for the past 2 years.
Well, Kevin, let me jump in. That's fascinating. It's a Department of Energy project that is building a digital twin with a focus on your transportation network.
Correct.
And it didn't come from the US DOT.
Correct. I don't get into politics.
That's interesting. Melissa, there's another, Gainesville's a big university town.
Yeah.
And there's a lot happening there, I know, in the smart city domain. Maybe you want to touch on some of the things you're personally involved with in terms of data analytics, perhaps some of the things that are happening around town, and maybe even want to touch on COVID-19.
Oh boy. I'd like to highlight some things that I don't have direct involvement in. And like Kevin, I'm on the performance measurement side of things, and really that central data office for the city to be innovative and show impact over time. So I am really excited about my field trips that are coming up on the fire truck and in the cop car, to explore that side that Kevin's talking about that I don't get much opportunity to work with. But we just signed a contract for a large solar energy project with our local utility company, and it's called Florida Solar 6. Supposed to be done in 2022. It is a sunshine state. I think we can count on a good amount of energy from that. 50 kilowatts. Couldn't tell you the unit, but it is supposed to be an improvement. We also just completed a citizen survey to kind of get a feel for how everyone's managing COVID, what kind of priorities they would like to see come up, just feedback in general, because our leadership, city commission, city manager have been finishing a new strategic plan. So for me, it's a really ideal time to be setting up a new performance management and impact evaluation program so that they line up and we can get off to a really great start. But because you mentioned COVID, we had a discussion the other day about not being able to find accurate data. What data can we use? How can we make a dent in the situation? And our county recently created a dashboard for business violators of code ordinance for masks or any other ordinance. So that's live data. If our citizens or neighbors want to go on there and kind of map out the safest routes for them to take care of their daily business, that's fairly helpful. They'll know where to purchase their food delivery, things that we can do in the immediate to combat.
Yeah, Melissa, I know previously you and I offline had talked about, one of the challenges of the COVID or the data is that it's not it's ambiguously defined. So data sets from different public agencies don't match up, and as a result, there's quite a bit of variability in the data. I know that Kevin and I come from that transportation world where the data sets for the ITS world are unambiguously defined, and you buy a traffic signal, it's plug and play, and you don't care who it comes from. We don't have that in a lot of other areas of our work life here.
I'm noticing that we're starting a grant with UF on carbon emissions, and there is sincere methodology, consensus. People have come to the table. We're going to use this, imputation. So I have begun to notice that really we have the capacity in so many other areas. As an example, Florida can track Burmese python snakes like it's their job, because they get out of control. They wreak havoc on other wildlife and humans. So, the capacity is there. I'm just not sure where the want to is at, because there's a sense of urgency, I think. John Cotter, Leading Change, he always said first step is to create a sense of urgency. Seems urgent.
It's interesting to me that I come from the lighting and the transportation domain, and today many folks have many suppliers, particularly lighting suppliers, outdoor lighting, street lighting suppliers, have reduced margins, and the IoT wave is coming, and they're all struggling to find a business case for this communications technology that now is almost free because your street light is microprocessor powered. However, the adoption rate is not anywhere near what everyone thought it was going to be a few years ago. And arguably there's a number of hurdles that human factors, people need to be educated a little bit about what you could do, but you also can't have suppliers just go out into the market and say, I've got the newest widget, because the customer may not even understand what this widget is going to do. So, I'm personally a big fan of this somewhat onerous process of going out and, educating and surveying, Melissa, as you just mentioned, your population, and finding their user needs, because it can't be, well, actually, I think we all know there's out there on the internet, there's the definitions of smart city 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. And 1.0, the literature states as, was driven by suppliers, that they had a widget and the sales guy came out and said, listen, whatever problem you have, this will fix it. And then in phase 2, or in Smart City 2.0, those suppliers partnered a bit with the public agencies, but that didn't go as well either, because the public agency itself doesn't have the perspective of the whole community. They're the manager of the infrastructure, but they're not really the end customer, because the end customer is the business community and the bicycle rider and the kids who walk to school and the PTA and the taxpayers and adjacent agencies and all kinds of other external folks. So, to move things forward, I think there needs to be a much more structured process, which is what I'm doing at the IEEE with the IEEE P2784 standard. And it's something that's proven to be productive and workable with the U.S. DOT's Intelligent Transportation Systems effort, which really envisioned this 20 years ago.
Right. We have slow adopters, I suppose.
Yeah.
And if we don't train the workforce, people just don't do what they don't know how to do, and things can be intimidating in the beginning. I think we're on the verge of needing to create a culture change pretty quickly. People like Kevin and I we do data in the corner and behind the scenes type of folks, but now we really need to step out and start educating, start piecing together the resources that are available and disseminating those items to other community builders to work with citizens or neighbors more so. Leverage those community groups. Just start to show them how easy it can be. Kind of gamify it, make it fun, interactive.
Well, that really is the challenge, isn't it? Both of you, all of us are data and technology natives. But when we think about digital transformation in larger sense, whether it be industrial or for public agencies, there are 3 pillars, and one's the technology. And the second is that the technology does drive a change in the business processes. And it also, the third pillar is actually the people and the staff. They need to evolve to support this new technology as well as these new business processes. And sometimes that third piece is by far the hardest. Kevin.
Yeah.
A lot of what we see in government is the silos of excellence that get created in different departments, and there's not this cross connectivity or cross pollination that could occur there to help start to make better decisions, better workflow efforts, and things like that. We're very data rich, but information poor. We haven't figured out all the assets that we've got out there and how to best leverage them to do some sort of actionable intel from. Some of the things that we've been working on here in Chattanooga is actually starting to use data from very disparate resources to paint a better picture about our transportation network. What are our pedestrian injuries and crashes look like? What do our standard crashes look like? How can we best mitigate them? Is speed a factor? How can we start tying together these data points that we've got access from tons of resources across the city to make a safer, better environment for our citizens? That's just one use case right now, and how we can start to leverage these things to make this smart city concept gain more traction with the public.
Well, okay. So Kevin, let me ask you about that, because that pedestrian accident, I ride my bicycle every day. And so pedestrian and bike accidents are near and dear to my heart. I've often thought, and I know that there is, from a lighting perspective, I'm involved in the Vision Zero effort. I've often thought that the total cost of ownership of a accident is not very well documented. And by this, what I mean is, okay, we have the personal injury of the pedestrian. You might have personal injury of the driver of the car, the physical damage to the vehicle. But then you have all of these other costs of fire and EMS. The hospital has to take somebody in. Slowdown of traffic on commerce. What does that do to deliveries in the neighborhood? What and are there cascading unexpected things that
your car?
There's a lot of them. I know there's a lot of them. So I'm guessing you have looked at some of that.
We have looked at a lot of that. The economic impacts come to mind from any kind of a crash scenario. How that impacts the roadway network, reliability of transit vehicles, what the overall cost to the community is to have these recurring and non-recurring incidents that impact our roadway network. How can we best manage through those things? So it's the totality of everything that we're trying to look at to bring the information together to make the best decision possible. The more we know, the better decision we'll have as an outcome.
Agreed.
I think that could be a lead-in, Kevin, for getting people super excited about learning new digital skills, particularly staff who need to come on board first and be a role model for the community. So if we tell them, this is going to make your life so much easier.
Yeah, we struggle with that internally. Transportation network for a long time has been viewed as a utility. We'll put it out there. If it's not broken, I'm not touching it until it does break. That's kind of changing right now because of the level of technology that we're able to assemble out there and the level of data that we can get in about how the system operates. The other piece to this is, and what I found here, and I've mentioned the idea of the collaboration that we have here in the city, is we're also looking at people that can actually help us move our message forward with elected officials, high-ranking officials within the city, to make sure that it is resonating in the specific areas that it needs to resonate to kind of keep this moving forward. It's a very arduous task to get this whole ball rolling, but once it's rolling, it's going to kind of have the snowball effect to a degree, and everybody's going to want to jump in and participate in this to some nature.
I agree. It's been hard to maintain that momentum during the pandemic, because you want to get people together in a learning lab and, various things to engage in.
This is actually one of the areas that we kind of worked in a little bit is during the COVID crisis, we used our data to kind of help drive some of our decisions. We were publishing activities about traffic volumes at several of our intersections, some downtown, some in the outlying areas by our regional mall and some other business areas, kind of track and see what the transportation network was seeing as far as movement out there. We noticed that there was a significant drop off. Almost 80% of traffic volumes dropped off in that first couple of weeks after the March 13th issuance of a stay-at-home order here. But it has slowly trended back up, and we're about 18 weeks, if I recall correctly, past that point right now, where traffic in the outlying areas is pretty much back to normal, or within a few percentage points of normal, but the downtown core is still only 25% under where it was pre-COVID. If we start to think about this and looking at the revenue models that are coming in from sales tax and other things that the economy provides for the city, we can actually start to tie some of these things together. We saw this tremendous drop-off in our traffic volumes. We weren't going to get tax revenue reports back for 90 days, probably 60 to 90 days in some issues or some instances. So if we could start to correlate those two subjects, we could actually begin to see or predict when the economy would start coming back to some degree. So there's just other ways to think about how to utilize the data.
Wow. So what other data points I have to ask, what other data points do you have there? I mean, sales tax is on a 60 or 90-day window, but I mean, do you have IoT-enabled parking meters or, I don't know, pedestrian cameras or?
We're actually working on a lot of those things. We, of course, personal information is very, very key to a lot of what we do.
Right.
And the testbed that we've deployed here on the urban core, we actually had public meetings about what the technology was, what it represented, so that the public out there knew what this was. We have little signs that are made up all along this corridor to kind of indicate that these sensors are for this purpose. We use anonymized video feeds that are able to pick out vehicles or pedestrians or bicycles within the network that shows how they're moving. We're actually starting to do some vectoral analysis of some of the moving components out there to look at near hit activities from a crash perspective between bikes and peds and vehicles. There's count information that we're getting about pathways that each type of mode or each mode of travel uses, and we're projecting out a lot of this information to create a very complete picture of what our urban core looks like and how people move in that core. We see people where there's jaywalking. Is that a place that we need to put a mid-block crossing in? Okay. Is there some places that we're seeing a higher crash rate by the volume and design of geometrics of the intersection that represents a higher crash rate than what we're seeing elsewhere? So how can we mitigate some of those types of instances?
Okay, well, Kevin, clearly Chattanooga's done a tremendous amount of work. Is this something that's repeatable for other similarly sized cities, or do you have some special aptitude here?
Well, I don't know about special aptitude. The biggest asset that we have realistically is the fiber network that the Electric Power Board put in 10 years ago. We're leveraging that to make or have the connectivity to our systems that we have. So that's really the key to any agency being able to develop these types of technologies out. The other thing is having a group of individuals that kind of have a vision about how to pull some of this stuff together. These aren't far outreaching vendor-driven solutions. These are little off-the-shelf technologies that we're deploying to kind of start to look at what can we do with this. And we approach this very much as similarly to how the Internet of Things has manifested, very agile in our project management perspective on this, how we move things forward. Small gains, looking at small steps and looking back at those events and figuring out where our successes and where our failures were and making minor modifications to the path as we move forward. We don't see a clear alignment between what we have today and what we expect tomorrow. There's not a clear vision of what that's going to look like. So we're making those small incremental changes as we move forward, very much like an agile model would in computer technologies.
I'm guessing those initiatives are tightly bound to user communities and actual real needs.
Yeah, we tie everything back to some sort of need in some sense, whether it's an equity need for transportation modality within our community. We've got lighting things that we're addressing to help and crash issues to increase our safety factors at different intersections and throughout corridors. Mm-hmm. We're trying to look at these things systemically so that we can create the environment that across the board that would be replicable elsewhere. One of the big challenges that we have as we start to think about things like moving forward to connected and autonomous vehicles at some point in time is going to be interoperability. The stuff that I have here in Chattanooga has got to work with the stuff in Florida or Los Angeles or Portland, Oregon, or wherever. And those same devices have to be able to work here almost seamlessly. So that's going to be the real big challenge I see as moving forward. Government has to start stepping up to this particular plate and start addressing these things.
Well,
from a governance standpoint.
I mean, as you know, from a transportation perspective, the US DOT is big on interoperable, unambiguous standards, and on the connected vehicle front, it was fascinating to me that I'm sure you're well aware of the 3 test beds that are around the country today,
Mm-hmm.
and the urban one in New York City and in the Tampa Hillsborough Authority one down in Tampa. Recently, they had to harmonize the definition of a crosswalk because they both went at it independently. And one of them defined the crosswalk as simply the space between the curbs that are in the roadway, and the
Mm-hmm.
other defined it as inclusive of the place where the pedestrians stand. You can't do both.
Okay.
So it's encouraging to see that the US DOT is down to that granularity. That's quite good. We are all still waiting for some connected vehicle or V2X radios in our cell phones. Shouldn't be long because we all know pedestrians don't like pressing the button and they don't like waiting even if they press the button.
Correct.
The pandemic and just the current state of things, the budgets that have been reduced significantly, do you think that's going to be a driver in rapid adoption of some of these things because they are cheaper?
I actually think it will. In many instances, how we deploy technologies can actually help in the law enforcement area also. Many agencies are starting to talk about defunding police departments and or reducing how the police are operating in effect out there. The use of technology in some instances, that's agnostic. It doesn't see, it just sees events. It does not perceive anything beyond that. So given the technology and the level of technology that we have available today, not that we're going to get to a complete Big Brother society, but there are certain ways that we can attract or monitor certain situations, anonymize the data that's coming back just to say, okay, this event occurred. These are the realistic outcomes of this. These are the bits of information or data that we have, whether it's a license plate or a MAC address from somebody's cell phone. I mean, there's different ways of pulling the information together that's completely anonymous in some instance.
Reduces bias. Yeah,
Right.
kind of it fosters the equity that we're all, pushing for.
So these are things that I can see kind of being drivers to kind of help push towards these types of technologies moving forward. One of the things in COVID that we've recognized is we've seen about a 88% increase in the number of preventative maintenance checks that we're able to go out and do because we're sending the guys straight from their house out into the field to start their workday rather than coming to a common office to prep before they go out. Kind of get the work assignments as they go, and it's actually improved productivity, a lot, exponentially to some degree.
Yeah, I think some of our public works to have varying shifts 30 minutes apart, and it's actually works more smoothly.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I think the most compelling solutions, if they have a strong business case, it can be bootstrapped. I have a close colleague from Lawrence, Kansas, who worked in the Public Works ITS department and got a request from a local university to pull some fiber to the university campus. And with some forethought, they put out, not just a dozen font pairs, but something like 144 or some much larger number. And as a result, there's now this bootstrapped fiber optic backbone that goes around Lawrence, Kansas, and that city, in fact, has done some work for adjoining public agencies, going to, plugging them into that fiber system. So it doesn't necessarily need to be, a huge capital, a heavy project. It could be just keeping your ear to the ground and listening.
I actually happened to be part of a group of telecoms back in the early 2000s that were going out and laying a lot of dark fiber. Right. It was an idea that was actually before its time, but there's use cases today for it. And that fiber's still out there. Most government agencies had worked out some sort of agreement with the fiber companies to lay this in the right of way. They probably still have rights to some of that duct space and or the fiber itself. There are several cities across the country that are utilizing that, bridging that to help their create their connected environment out there. So there's pathways. It just takes some pretty out of the box thinkers and people that can kind of start to vision some of these things. And you don't have to go out and make a grand, exploration into this area. You just make small incremental pieces and enhance what you've got out there. You'd be surprised at how much you can do. And then the support that generates will help you to fund and manage and move forward on the rest of it.
I've been looking at funding proposals recently, obviously, to make up for some budget deficits. And what I continue to see over and over is that preference will be given to collaborations, partnerships.
That's very true.
Within the community, private sector, public sector. So that hopefully will harmonize some of the data over time.
This is true. One of the things that we see frequently to talk about that point specifically, local government entities are very siloed, and in theory, a lot of elected officials and whatnot don't see anything beyond their city borders. Things need to be approached in a regional perspective. The customer, the user of the network doesn't know where the city boundary is. They just know that the roadway network connects me from here to my office or to my doctor's office or the grocery store. It's seamless. The whole network has to be seamless.
Indeed. And those silos need to be broken down. I know a story from the West Coast where the parking revenue dropped precipitously, the parking violations revenue dropped by 80%. And the city for a few weeks couldn't figure it out. And then they looked around in a different silo and recognized that they put their street sweepers on a much different schedule, as in once a month rather than every other day. And it was the street sweepers that were calling in all the parking violations. That's a great silo story.
Yeah.
But hey, we've got about 5 minutes to go. It's been great having both of you here today. Can you each sum up with maybe some salient points about what do you really need to remember to build a smart city? Melissa, go ahead.
I probably will have a much different take on it. I'm newer to this game, but I would say you need community buy-in and engagement and a platform that looks exactly like Facebook. If an entire globe can sync up to that, one thing by creating behavior change, intrinsic motivation, I think finding ways to capture your audience can lead to the education, the deployment, the other stuff. But Kevin is a senior guru who probably has a very intense answer.
Thanks for the senior part.
Senior as an expertise.
Yeah. The takeaways. I've been doing this for a while. The takeaways is a couple fold. Plan what you're doing. Have a vision. Have some sort of idea where you want to be with this, but don't set a specific destination. Make those small incremental changes that can start to aggregate data from one resource or another and look at what that can possibly bring you. There's a ton of things out there that we could be looking at, but we kind of have to manage what we have access to and how we can best utilize it to make the decision point that we want to move forward on. So there's got to be a degree of maturity that needs to oversee what's being done. There has to be a degree of governance of how we look at these things and how we can move forward with these things. The security aspect is still a developing area that needs to be given attention to. Interoperability. And then the ultimate challenge is going to be the maintenance and operation of the systems once they're installed. Making sure that your staff is ramped up to be able to take on those challenges. Making sure that the planners and the public works people are on board with, deploying some technologies with some of their projects. And just build out from there. It can be small baby steps to begin with, but once you start to establish that footprint,
Great.
It sort of reminds me of Bayesian modeling, where the learning just keeps impacting the learning that it just, it's like he's saying, don't be so set on a particular outcome that you miss a ton of opportunities. It's almost like veering just a little bit, not enough to drive off the road, but having your eyes open. I like that.
Yep.
This is why I mentioned the agile perspective in this.
Yep, exactly. Well, thank you both. This has been a very, very insightful discussion. It's been a pleasure to have both of you. And to everyone who's listening, please join us again for another edition of the Smart City Podcast. Have a great afternoon.
Stay safe.
Thanks. Take
All
care.
right. Hey,
Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities Podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.